hello, everybody, and thanks for coming to this talk, Practical Sketching for Technical Communicators. This is really about how I use sketching as part of my writing process and how it connects to creativity through movement. And this is I consider this sort of a casual presentation because I have my notes because I don't want to forget anything. I might go off topic, but I would like you to save your questions for the end, just because I know some people will put them in the chat and I can't see the chat from here, so that'll just be helpful. So my definition of what practical sketching is using basic shapes and lines to convey a word or idea, and how it can help you in your work life and your everyday life. And I've been presenting this this topic for a few years now, first in 2019, I think, at the STC conference. And it was more just about how sketching is beneficial, but not necessarily carrying it through to, how it can help you in your everyday life. And this topic really is not for everybody, because some people can write an entire document in their head and then sit down to type it. And I know that those people exist because I'm married to one of them, and the amount of times he's bragged about not taking pen and paper into a meeting is just weird to me. But anyway, this is for those of us who do take pen and paper to meetings. So it's a good idea because sketching and doodling too, can be used as tools to help understand relationships. So think of if you sketch out a recipe, you can kind of understand the relationships of the amounts of that you need. You can use it to solve problems. Can think about drawing a map, and you can maybe understand spatial relationships a little bit better, and also remembering things. And it's the remembering things that I really first presented about in 2019, because this was just so fascinating to me. These studies about that basically drawing is proven by science to help you remember. Jackie Andrade did a study in 2009 called "What Does Doodling Do?" And the subjects had to listen to a long voicemail message and either draw or not draw while listening, or doodle. And the people who listened recalled 29% more information. And that is a lot. That is a lot more than the people who didn't doodle. And then this other study by Jeffrey Wams in 2016 says that you achieve the highest level of memory recall when you draw a word's meaning. So think about if you draw your grocery list, you're more likely to remember what it is that you need. So at the end of that first talk in 2019 that highlighted the benefits of practical sketching, somebody asked, how do we do that? What is it like as part of your process? And I didn't really have an answer. I didn't totally understand at the time how it was part of my process. So this talk is kind of a response to that. And it's about this big idea, which is that as technical communicators, we can use sketching as part of our process to capture information from a variety of sources, but also as people who just need to remember things and to write things down and to plan and to solve problems, we can use sketching as part of our process. Because it'll help to understand as you're reading something, as you're thinking through it, and it can help you get unstuck. So if I'm stuck and I want to make sure I understand some new information, I find that if I start with a piece of paper, I draw out what I'm working on, I annotate it, then I know it better, I understand it, and I've worked out the problem. So I'm in a position to tell y'all about this because I am both a technical writer and an artist. I have been a technical writer for about 11 years. I've only been a certified professional technical communicator since 2019 though. And, but I worked at my previous job. I was a senior IT technical writer, senior documentation specialist for 8 years. And I wrote release notes for 5 systems for 10 to 40,000 users. And in my current position, It's a generic title. It's Associate Manager of IT Communications, but I'm just working on a wide range of documents, outage emails, a little bit more marketing communications, but still working with user communications as well. And then as an artist and a sketcher, I've had at least 45 solo and group shows since 1999. I've done at least a dozen, but probably more than that, art talks, not including when I worked as a public art project manager. And I taught art to adults for 10 years in addition to my day job. That was like my night job, my other night job, in addition to making art. But the processes here are very similar because I'm working with information in both as a technical writer and an artist. I'm working with information to figure it out. And then I'm either putting it in a painting or in a document or a presentation. And I've created this presentation with the help of these books and authors. So some of these I really used for the first version of the talk, and I'm continuing to read information about this subject because it's just so interesting to me. And I also have a resource document that I can share with you that lists all of these books and authors. Specific help is from these people. Sunny Brown kind of got me started on this. She wrote a book called The Doodle Revolution, and she says that doodling helps you think, and she wants you to bring doodling to work with you because of its benefits. Edward Tufte is a statistician and an artist, and he has tons of books about data visualization. And I don't actually mention him in the presentation, but he is influential here. Austin Kleon writes books about the creative process. And in his books, he talks about working digitally versus analog. And he's actually split his office into two sections, digital versus analog. And he says that the analog is where most of his work is born. Ursula Kolb is an artist and early education professional, and she says the act of drawing triggers thinking. And then Linda Berry is an artist and a writer, and she says that anyone can draw, which I agree with. And I would recommend that you read her books to learn to love your drawings. So let's go back to the problem at hand, which is that we have to acquire information from a variety of sources, and we have to understand that information in order to write about it. So how do we put it all together? And sorry, I've lost my place in my notes. And that's actually funny that I lost my place there, because one of the things that this has been helpful to me as a process is pandemic brain, which is, where your brain is all fuzzy because everything is different. And brains, like our brains really not functioning at standard capacity. So I've found this to be really helpful in the past 2 years because, on top of that, what we do is a messy process. We get information from SMEs, we read through documentation, we look at the testing, but maybe there's not much information there, and maybe the SMEs are not that helpful. So how do we put it all together to make sure we understand what we're reading and capture the right information? And my solution is to draw about it. So people have all sorts of ways of understanding and capturing information, and I'm offering sketching as one solution because it's a way to see your information, to weed out what you don't need, and to spark ideas for conveying what readers need to know. So why sketch? When you're working something out on paper, making a shape or a drawing helps you to anchor your thought or your idea or the important information. So in this outline example, each topic is a separate little sketch, so I can clearly see what information I have. I mean, it's obviously just an outline, but it helps me to really focus in on what is important. It helps me to see it clearly and to understand it. So action and, sorry, this is like, I know I just recently gave this and I'm like, what do these notes mean? So let me just go to the next one. So it's this idea of action, of the action of sketching and annotating that helps you to get your brain unstuck by sparking new ideas. So this example is, I was working on an art talk And I had a story about how when I switched careers really from public art project management to technical writing, I had to also think about how I how I needed to change how I made my art, how and when and where. But I didn't know how to tell that story really. So I literally just started drawing what was happening. Like I drew like the building where I worked and I have a new job and then there's me. And it helped my brain to keep moving to get unstuck. So let's talk about anchoring your thoughts. So you might want to start with a visual alphabet. And you could see in some of my sketches where I start with like a little box, a little drawing, and these are things that are actually recommended by some of the authors that I mentioned before. So it starts with shapes or images to form this visual alphabet. And it's called that because it's kind of a new language made up of these basic elements. So sometimes it's shapes, just shapes and not drawings, but it has the same effect, but it has the action of drawing and also helps you to anchor those thoughts. So these are some that I use pretty often. And you might want to think about creating your own image library of things you have figured out how to draw that represent real world objects. I don't actually kind of go to this for reference, but these are things that I use a lot. Like I use a little envelope for email, because that's the email icon, a little person shape. That little grid is like a meeting. And sometimes I just do like a square and write a word in it because that really has the same effect. And this is a real world example of, I was making a list of things I needed to do for a project. So I anchored each item with a little drawing just to help me work out what I was doing and understand what was really important. So these are pretty simplistic little drawings. And that is really the goal, is for us to just draw like children and not getting caught up in making things look nice. So Ursula Kolb, who I mentioned before, wrote a book called It's Not a Bird Yet. And she talks about object-centered drawings and says a child's drawing of a flower doesn't represent a specific view of a particular flower. It represents the general idea of a flower. And she also says that children's representations are pictorial equivalents of things, not attempts to make realistic copies. So that's really all we're striving for here. Okay, so that's the anchor part of it. And now for action. So this part is really about bringing creativity into your process. So creativity can be making something new, or bringing something new into existence, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like a painting or a craft project or a beautifully decorated cake. It can be that one word you're looking for, or figuring out how to design a new document, or really solving a problem. And creativity doesn't belong to any particular group. We as technical writers are the creative weirdos of IT. So let's just give ourselves permission to be that. So action brings creativity into your process with movement. So Ursula Kolb, again, gave us this idea that time plus space plus materials make it possible for children to explore and invent and to make their ideas visible. And then Austin Kleon and artists kind of co-opted this with the equation time plus space plus resources equals artist's work. And then I would take either of those above equations and add physical movement or action to turn this equation into an opportunity for creativity. So physical movement is talked about again by Ursula Kolb, and It's Not a Bird Yet. And in that book, she's studying how children draw. It's really interesting. She describes how very young children use drawing as physical thinking. So one great example is that the kids, and these are really young kids, were looking at an ant habitat. And they started making drawings about the ants, and then their drawings sparked more questions, and they tried to figure out the answers with more drawings. She also says that kids start to tell a story by the third or fourth page of drawing, showing how aimless scribbling offers children a way to tap into their imagination. So there's like a connection there between what the hand is doing and how the brain is using that information. And then Linda Berry also talks about this and says that writing by hand accesses different parts of the brain. So she keeps extra paper for doodling or for writing the alphabet for when she's stuck. She just keeps it next to her while she's working, so that movement will help to keep her going. She says that writing by hand accesses a state of mind that requires participation with something physical, pen or pencil, using ordinary motion like writing the alphabet. And in contrast, your fingers on a keyboard is motion, but there are no variables. And then this is like my favorite part. Both of these statements by Linda Berry and Ursula Kolb are supported by a recent Japanese study showing that writing on physical paper can lead to more brain activity, saying the unique, complex, spatial, and tactile information associated with writing by hand leads to improved memory. And they mention in it the tangible permanence, irregular strokes, and uneven shapes of using pen or pencil on paper. So that study mentions improved memory, but subjects who used paper had more brain activities also in areas associated with language, imaginary visualization, and navigation. So that hand and brain connection is more likely to happen, that spark is more likely to happen with pen and paper, pencil and paper. So the first time I noticed it myself, I had kind of already seen the equations, the Austin Kleon and the Ursula Kolb. And I was doing this demonstration painting for a class I was teaching. I wasn't working on it very often. And so I kept getting stuck on it. And so one day I was just, I had this like a quiet moment in the class, and I was cutting up some pieces I had already done. And I saw that it was the physical activity of working on this that brought out the new ideas and the solution to my problem. So I would not have come up with the solution without doing the work of physically using the materials. So since then, I've been working with this idea that physical movement or using your hands is like really the key ingredient to creativity, to problem solving, and to coming up with new ideas. And not just in the studio, but also in my technical communication work, but also in my everyday life, like coming up, like working out a Thanksgiving dinner plan or a road trip. So I got stuck working on this presentation, and this happens a lot where I'm like, oh, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do next, or I don't know what to write. I'm like, oh yeah, I can just use this process, pull out a legal pad. And I just started sketching out all of the things, sketching and annotating the information I already had and the steps I had taken until that sparked an idea, a clear idea of what I needed to do next. So when I get stuck, I tell myself to draw about it. I get out my pen and paper. I start drawing images for the information that I have to anchor my thoughts, and I annotate them, I draw some more, and then new ideas come for what I need to communicate or the problem I need to solve. So I'm going to show you some real world examples of this. So, and Faith, you had mentioned taking notes and then redrawing the notes. So that's what this is about. So this is my process for using notes, for understanding, then editing, then outlining. So I take a lot of notes during meetings, sometimes on paper, but sometimes I do lately use OneNote because I can get more down when I'm typing. And I don't have to worry about like the physical movement and the sparking because it's the next part of the process, because I just end up with a page full of words. And then to process my notes, I find and sketch the most important information and see how it connects and what information is or isn't needed. So in this example, I was adding to a document I'd already been working on. So I needed to figure out what's important and where does the information need to go. So from the notes, like I knew that there was like a mobile application, steps to take, and new information to mention. So to resolve it, I drew out, in addition to drawing out the parts that I found important. I drew out the 4 existing pages and redesigned it with the new information from the meeting. So I was able to write and revise this pretty quickly rather than trying to just mine the pertinent information from my notes as I was writing it. I had a clear outline, ended up with a clear outline of the steps I needed to take. And this is remarkably similar to the process I use when I make paintings, because I always start from existing information, either photographs or sketches or a combination. I make sketches to work out what's going on in the painting, like shapes, colors, textures, etc. And then I put all of that information together in a painting, but I sketch again when I get stuck. So you can kind of see that down here, these different versions of what became eventually the painting right here. I had like a little zebra crossing, but I didn't like that. And so I was trying out different options for what's important, what needs to go in, what needs to be taken out. So here's some more real world examples of when and how this process can help you. So let's see. So I talked about how sketching is beneficial by anchoring your thoughts and sparking ideas. And so I wrote this whole part because I need this, because I need to see like how other people do it, pick and choose what I want. I need a little bit of the connections made for me. So in this example, this is kind of like, one of the times I used it for understanding. So this was a coworker trying to be helpful, bless his heart, by giving me like every possible bit of information. And this was also March 2nd of 2021. So it was like super pandemic brain. So I got this outpouring of words and I needed help trying to figure it out. So I drew about it. There it is. And I drew kind of the basic information to see what I had. I kind of parked information, like I put something down, like this might be something I need later. That way I could also work out spellings and punctuations, who else to notify, time span and time zone, because this is for Australia, and you can see my, like, off the top of my head, little weird, sorry, I should not have done that. Weird little drawing of Australia up there. The result of all of this was 3 sentences about this issue. So I really needed that process to understand what he was saying and then understand what I needed to say. What do users need to know? Get to the point. So that helped me to do that. Another example of figuring out next steps and thinking through information. This was, again, based on an email. I needed to understand, again, what they were telling me about the actions that needed to be taken. So you can see that there are some some little doodles, like there's me right here, like Pete's email went to me. Like, it's that sort of simplistic and silly, because it's that action of just continuing to move my hand and to kind of help spark that hand-brain connection that I, was able to help keep me going, and to figure out what it was I needed to do. I noticed that now I do that a lot, where I will, I know I need to draw about it. So I'll pull out my legal pad and I'll kind of make an elaborate title for whatever the project is, just to sort of warm up my brain and my hand, and knowing that I'm going to have to draw all this and figure it out. Here's another example about developing content. And really all of this is developing content, but this was starting from scratch with information for a lunch and learn about tools for effective communication that I was creating with a coworker. So this sort of looks like mind mapping, but I feel like this process is a little less prescribed. We're just parking ideas here. We're working out how they relate to each other. And then it ended up with an outline over on the right. And it, ended up with an outline of what sections I needed to cover, what goes into each section. And so what I ended up with is something that ended up neat, tidy, and I probably could share it with another person and they could understand it. But I want to use this example to say that these are just really for you. So it doesn't matter how messy or how silly they end up. A lot of times what I'll do is once I get what I need from them, I'll just rip them up and throw them away. Except for that, then I do these presentations. So I save the fun ones. But these are really just for you. It doesn't matter really what they look like as long as they work. So to sum up, when I get stuck or when I need to start something new, I draw about it. I get out pen and paper, I anchor my thoughts and I annotate them. I draw more. I see if I understand what I have, and I keep that action going to spark new ideas. And it doesn't matter what it looks like. As Linda Berry says, you don't have to like the way your drawings look for them to start to work. So the act of sketching, the action of sketching and annotating as part of your process helps you capture or anchor and understand. It helps you think through your problems. It helps you get unstuck and spark new ideas. So I hope that I've conveyed this, and I hope that you will try this and make it your own. So thank you so much for listening.
Wow, that's awesome. I love so much that whole phenomenon of just getting unstuck. And even if it's something I found, that I'm writing about that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like the most technical kind of like, I don't want to say boring, but sometimes it is boring thing. And it does help to just kind of like sketch it out. And then it just helps the whole process. It really is amazing. And I am not by any way, shape or form an artist, a sketch, but when that was one thing that I really loved is that you don't have to be, you can just, do it for your own sake. And it does really help. I have come to really enjoy this whole practice. So I will open it up. Does anybody have any questions for Elizabeth? Don't see anything in the chat.
Oh, hi, Elizabeth.
Hey.
I just want to thank you for your presentation. And while you were talking, I was thinking about this artist because I am a writer first, and I just sketch for fun. I'm kind of coming at it from the writer's perspective, and I was reading a book a while ago by Betty Edwards. Do you do much with Betty Edwards? I was thinking about what you're talking about. I grabbed this off my shelf. It's drawing on the right side of the brain. And your presentation was making me think of sort of how you're stimulating both hemispheres. Sorry about my cat. Stimulating both hemispheres to kind of generate that left brain thinking for writing. Is that, have you experienced that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that must be exactly what it is. And I'm going to write that down because I actually haven't read that book. I've been familiar with it for years, and I always think that I have a copy, and I go to look and there's not a copy on my shelf, but I'm going to look at that because I think it must have something to do with that. And I believe that a couple of people in the books that I mentioned do mention that, but that's probably what is happening there is, and like that Japanese study said, that action, it sparks areas in your brain for language and imagination and navigation, which is just fascinating.
Because I don't want to take up too many of the questions times, but something I used to teach my students was to cut up their essays if they were having trouble with the arrangement of the information. And I later found out that this was a study done by Patricia O'Connell Killen, having her students make posters and you visually can see how the data will interact if you kind of physically put it together. And I was kind of thinking, is this one of your main goals?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. It's something that I've done before too, and I've read about, and it's probably something that I got from Austin Kleon, cutting up your work and rearranging it. And I think that is part of this, like when I talk about physical movement, it's really not just the drawing part, but it's, if you're cutting things up, if you're taping them. I did that for this presentation originally and taped them up on my wall. And I think I gave a version of this talk where I showed the pictures of all my cut up pieces of paper on the wall. But that sort of physical movement, I mean, I've been playing with the idea that really any kind of physical movement might help. So sometimes before I go into my studio, I'll go into the kitchen and cook, because that is creative movement. And then I got back into crocheting because I was like, ooh, what if that kind of movement will help me in other areas? I haven't really proven that it does, but I have crocheted a lot of things in the past 3 years. But yeah, I really just totally believe that it's the movement that helps and that gets you unstuck. So I love the idea of making a poster.
Awesome. I do that too, by the way. I go in and cook whenever I need like a writer's block kind of a thing.
Yeah. Cooking is great for that.
And then you get to eat afterwards, so it's even better.
Right. Yes.
Addison has a question for you. He says, what was your first experience with bringing sketching into your technical writing career? What sparked it, or has it always been part of your process?
That's a great question. And I think it's always been part of my process because I just sketch all the time, but I normally sketch things that are kind of in front of me. I'll sketch my coffee cups. But I also have always doodled, although, teacher, that is something that I did less the more that I went through school, the less I doodled, because teachers do not care for that. But I always included some sketching in my notes. So I kind of have done that a little bit with work. But it was really I started kind of noticing some similarities between technical communication and drawing from life, because you're dealing with, information that exists and you're reinterpreting it maybe and presenting it in a different way. And I thought oh, wouldn't it be funny to do a presentation about that? But then I started looking at these studies and I was like, it's not funny, it's real, it's science, it's important. So it probably came, I probably started using it without realizing it in technical communication. But now it's obviously it's an obvious part of my process, and I share it with others.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, I think it is so fascinating, and it really helped me, like I said, to get over the hump of, oh, I can't really draw. But it's so helpful because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter as long as it helps.
Awesome. And you said you had a reference list. Could you email that to me, and then I will email it to the attendees, people who signed up?
Yeah. I'm
awesome.
happy to share it.
And this is being recorded, and it will be on our YouTube channel for 6 months. So until October.
Right.
Perfect. All right, guys. Well, if nobody else has any questions, then we can commence for the day. I appreciate everybody attending, and I especially appreciate Elizabeth for this awesome presentation. It is so helpful. I could listen to it over and over again.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me. I love talking about this and just, sharing this. So thank you.
All right. Well, everybody have a wonderful day, and I will be getting that reference list to you guys, soon, within the next day or two. So, yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Welcome. Bye.
Thank you.